Hey, it's Mike with TechBB, and I don't know, since there wasn't that big of a difference between the DM9 and the DM10, I think I'm just going to do a combination show on the DM10 with the Rendition magnet trigger kits that I sell. So there really wasn't a lot of changes between the DM9 and the DM10. For the most part, internally and stuff like that, it's pretty much the same. I did hear some rumors that they did a little bit of tweaking to the LPR. I'm not exactly sure if that's true or not, but as far as I can tell, there's just slightly different milling. And probably the most exciting thing is going to be the Ironman trigger, okay, or the adjustable trigger that comes on. Really nice trigger. If you are looking, if you own a gun with an ultralight frame, proto, or a DM, maybe like a DM5, 6, 7, whatever ones that came with the ultralight frame, this type of curved design just feels great. Now I'm going to install the magnet trigger kit on this. Taking apart the grip frame is probably one of the most common upgrades that people do. They like to take apart the grip frame and put either boards or triggers in there and stuff like that. But either pick up the Ironman trigger from Dye, or Walter over at ProStar Paintball also makes a Violent Products Delrin trigger, which is really nice also. Almost has about the same shape. I think it's actually a little bit lighter. I do like this trigger almost a little bit better than the stock one, because the bearings have extended inners, which means that they don't rub against the frame, which is really nice. So ProStar PB for the Violent Series trigger, but the trigger, or I'm sorry, the magnet trigger kit that we're going to install here fits both. Now, the first magnet trigger kit that I made for the DM series gun worked pretty well, but unfortunately the geometry of the trigger spring on the DM series guns is completely off. Now actually, before I take this apart, let's go ahead and weigh the gun really quick. Put the macro line back in, and let's turn it on. There we go. As you can see, we've got a battery in there. We don't pull any tricks here on TechBB. Oh, and also the feed neck's different. The feed neck uses a design like this. Basically, you use the lever lock to loosen or tighten it. I kind of like the design a little better, where you can do the fine-tuning adjustments on one side and then lock it. Sometimes I find that this style feed neck, it's either too tight or too loose, because you basically have to pivot a full 360 degrees in order for it to lock back in again. But let's go ahead and turn on the scale, and let's see where the new... Oops. Had it on grams. Who uses grams anyway? Here we go. Okay. DM10, 2 pounds, 2.8 ounces, 2 pounds, 2.8 ounces. Got that out of the way. That's actually pretty light. And first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and remove the grips. Overall, a DM is a great gun. It's a lot of pro teams use it. Not necessarily that gives it credibility, but Dye's a great company. They got great customer service. And, like I said, probably the Ironman trigger, I'm not going to say makes this gun, but definitely feels great in the hands. I've never been that big of an ultralight frame person. I didn't like the stock triggers, the old blade triggers, but the Ironman trigger actually does feel really good on this gun. Everything else pretty much is exactly the same. So feed neck, trigger, milling is slightly different. Oh yeah, and there's a little extrusion carved out of the top there. So someone's like, I've got a DM10. They're like, no, you don't. You've got a DM9. All you got to do to prove them wrong is check the top here, and there's a little milling cut out there. So we pull the trigger out. That's just to prevent it from the battery falling out and stuff like that. But what we're going to do really quick is we're going to go ahead and remove the trigger and install the Rendition magnet trigger kit. Now, the problem with the stock spring and how this is set up is the magnet is here. Well, the stop is here and the spring is here. The problem is the spring almost goes completely on top of, the screw almost goes completely on top of where the spring is at. Now when you put the magnet trigger kit in here, if you're not careful, the magnet can actually go over the top of the repelling magnet. Well, I came up with a new way that not only reduces the weight of the trigger, but also makes it to where it lines up perfectly. I've been trying to find the right size magnet for quite a while. So let's go ahead and remove the trigger frame. Now the first thing you want to do is grab the wire harnesses and pull them out. Now anytime you pull out wire harnesses, you always want to pull them out by the plastic connectors. You never want to pull them out by the wires. Now since the grip frame screws use the same Allen key as the grip screws, let's go ahead and take that out. Now here's a good tip. Anytime you're taking the frame off of your DM series gun, anytime you're taking the frame off of your DM series gun, especially like this one with the 9 and the 10, where you've got a screw that's recessed into the frame, always check it to make sure that that is the best looking screw that you've got on your gun in terms of the grips and stuff like that. They all use the same screw. So if this screw, especially this one that's up front here, is a little bit beat up or maybe looks a little bit stripped out, I would just go ahead and replace it while you've got your gun apart. It's a good idea. It's a smart thing to do. You always want the screws that hold your frame to your body to be the best looking screws that you've got here. Now you don't have to loosen that all the way, you just got to loosen it up a little bit. And you want to be really careful pulling the wires out of the frame, because it's very easy to, if you separate it really fast, to get these caught and yank the Molex connectors off. But basically these are the screws that I'm talking about. Screw in the back and the screw in the front. You want to make sure that these screws look perfect. Okay, you've got a bunch of other screws here. They're all the same size as the ones that go into your grip. But if these look a little chewed up, maybe a little stripped out, look a little dodgy, go ahead and replace them. Replace it with either the one that comes in your kit or with one of the other ones that's on the grip that looks even better. So anyway, with that being said, if you want to remove your LPR, very simple. Don't worry about the middle screw. That's just an air passage hole. Take out the back screw, unscrew the cap. Out comes the LPR. The bolt removes the same way. The regulator, exactly the same. No differences there. Go watch the DM10 video if you need a maintenance. If you need to learn how to do the maintenance on it, because it's pretty much the same exact gun. All right, now let's start with installing the magnet trigger kit. Let's go ahead and get the Allen key. Now you've got 3 screws that are going to hold this together. You've got the post and pre-travel. There we go. And then you've got your trigger pin that goes through the bearings. So 1, 2, 3, and sometimes that can be a little tough to get out. There it goes. I want to put a little lube on that before we put it back in. All right. Now out comes the trigger, out comes the spring, and like I said, in the past, the traditional Rendition magnet trigger kit that I used to sell used to replace this screw with a new screw and used to put the magnet on top of that. Problem is the geometry on the DM series is so screwed up that the spring doesn't line up with the screw, and that's why you feel that binding and that crunching with your DM trigger. So let's go ahead and we're going to remove the spring tension screw, and basically all we're going to do is we're just going to screw it right out of the back of the trigger. Now the new kit that I've designed, I found a magnet that basically you're going to glue to the trigger that feels great. You don't have to worry about any adjustment screw or anything, so you get to remove that weight. All right, now what we're going to do is let's go ahead and put the first magnet in place. Now this goes right into the little well where the spring was at. Now these do fit in there a little bit snug. You don't have to put any glue here. There we go. Okay, we got that in there. Okay, now basically the back, or the big magnet just goes right into where the spring was at. Now we'll go ahead and set that aside. Now probably one of the hardest parts, it's actually pretty easy, but you need to make sure you get the polarity right. So let's just take a guess. And let's see if we got the polarity right. Okay, now it's repelling, which is good. That's exactly what we need. All right, so we know that's facing the right way. Now we're going to take some super glue. There we go. Now, there's a way that you have to glue this. There's a way that you have to glue this magnet on here. You don't glue it below the hole here. You glue it so it's halfway covering it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw you a picture here so you kind of see what I'm talking about. This is the back of the trigger. Okay. This is the hole where the screw comes out. The spring tension screw. The magnet covers up half the hole. So you're going to put just a little bit of glue right here, and the magnet is going to cover up half the hole. You don't want to put it too low because it's going to hit your trigger switch. You want to put it so it's halfway covering up the hole. Now the super glue does come out like water, so you got to be careful. You just want to put a very small amount. There we go. I'm going to set that right there. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, I have a little bit of the magnet is halfway glued over the hole. And now, while this sets, because you want to give this probably at least a minute or two to set. It is super glue and it glues really fast, but you do want to get it some good, a good bonding time. Let's go ahead and go out and do the efficiency test.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Mike, and we're going to do the efficiency test on the DM10. And what we'll do is I'll show you the gauge here on the tank. I think we're sitting just a hair over 4,000 PSI. Yeah, about 4,100 PSI. Let me go ahead and take a tank temperature reading. About 75 degrees on the tank. And now what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and load up our first pod. Now we're shooting RPS Premium. RPS was nice enough to pick up the TechBB show, so you guys send them a thank you if you like seeing us efficiency test these guns. And let's go ahead and shoot over the chronograph, see where we're at. Looks good to me. Whoops. And pick up my Allen key out of the mud. And we've got my boy Alex here. He's going to help us out. So that way I don't have to worry about doing any work today. And go ahead, Alex, fire when ready. Just loaded up our third pod. There you go. That was our sixth pod. We're running out. Like this. Is it still going? We'll try loading up. See how we're doing here. One more. See if we get a little out of that one. No. Oh, let me see. Let me try. There we go. Let's try that. Nah. Looks like that was a wasted pod. All right. So we didn't get much out of that one. Here, we'll dump that back in here. Tip it upside down. There we go. We didn't get much out of that one. That's probably 20% of that pod. That's almost full. So. We got 2, 4, 6, 7, about 7 and about a quarter pods out of the DM10. Thank you.
All right, so there's the efficiency test. And now let's go ahead and put this back together. Now we've got the trigger pin, and as you guys felt, a little tough getting it out, so let's just put a little drop of lube on here. Go. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the trigger back into the gun. There we go. A little bit tough to get lined up, but there we go. Okay, now let's go ahead and tighten these down, tighten the trigger pin screw down. Now you don't want to tighten this down too much because you can cause the trigger to bind. So you just want to make sure you keep testing it out. And you basically just want the screw to be a little bit past flush. Felt a little binding there, so let's loosen it up a little bit. There we go. All right. Now let's go ahead and put in the post and pre-travel. Now I always recommend starting with the bottom one. The bottom one is the post travel. Basically what you do is as you're screwing it down, you keep pulling your trigger and you basically adjust it to where it stops a little bit past the point of, to where it stops just a little bit past the point of hitting the trigger switch. Now if you don't have any Loctite, the super glue actually works just fine. It's not so strong that you're not going to be able to back it out. It's not like red Loctite, but the super glue actually works pretty well for holding these adjustment pins in place. Now basically here you just want to keep there we go. Alright. And I mean that feels great. I mean you don't feel the trigger spring binding. Trigger feels nice and light, nice and snappy. That feels great. All right, now the next step, pretty simple. We're going to put it back together. As always, inspect the screws that you're using to screw your frame into your body. Very important. Okay, now what you want to do at this point, as you start tightening this down, you want to be very careful that there's no gaps between your frame and your body. Usually if there's a gap between your frame and your body, that usually means you've got a wire caught. And you definitely want to take your time here, or you're going to be buying new eye wires or a new solenoid wire. So you want to check both sides of your gun, left and right side, to make sure that it's on there perfectly, you know, and that it fits nice and flush. Because if you tighten it down when there's a gap, 90% of the time there's an eye wire that's caught or a solenoid wire that's caught. That could be a very expensive mistake. And we got it back on here, and I mean that trigger just feels great. So let's go ahead and put the eye wire and the solenoid wire back in. Let's go ahead and put the grip back on. Now as I'm putting the grip back on, let's do a conclusion. So what do I think of the DM10? The DM10 shoots good. Obviously there are a lot of websites right now that have DM9s for sale with a free rotor for about $200 less than the DM10. If you're on a budget and you need a new loader, that's probably what I would grab. Now they're not going to be on the market for that much longer, because as people buy up the inventory, those are going to disappear. I think even right now they're starting to offer the DM10 with a free rotor, but definitely weigh the cost out of a DM9 plus a new trigger like a ProStar trigger versus a DM10. I mean, honestly, when you're out there on the field, you're not going to notice the difference. There's very little changes between the 9 and the 10. Let's go and put the battery back in here. But these guns shoot great, they definitely shoot really, really nice. Dye is a great company, they're great customer service, they're at all of the events. All right, cool, put the battery in. Right away on the first shot. Can't beat that. But, I mean, I'm not a very big fan of the ultralight frame just because I've got big hands and it almost feels like when I'm out there playing, it's almost like holding your credit card. But I definitely got to say that the Iron Man trigger on the DM10 really woke this gun up in terms of how it feels ergonomically. I was not a fan of the standard trigger. The old triggers that they had, like on the DM9, it's that flat blade trigger. I didn't like that trigger at all. The Iron Man trigger feels great. Definitely a really nice feeling trigger. And I'm glad they're going with it. The NT has it as a stock trigger. The DM10 has it as a stock trigger, and I really like the way that feels. But, you know, DMs are definitely not expensive markers by any, or not inexpensive markers by any stretch of the imagination. They're over $1,000 right now. But the milling's great, the anodizing's great on them. I have a video up showing people how to tune the LPR. It's probably one of the hardest, not necessarily the hardest thing to do, but probably one of the things that has the most questions. A lot of people don't quite understand how the LPR works on the DM. Let's go ahead and put in the macro line. There we go. And we're all set. But one thing that is really tricky is being able to adjust the ASA right here. I mean, as you see, my ASA slid back a little bit on this one. I like my ASA slid back a little bit more because I've got longer arms. But all in all, I mean, they're absolute solid markers. Definitely some of the top spool valve markers that are on the market right now. I'm not a very big fan of this style feed neck. I kind of like the older style feed neck a little bit better, where you had the adjustment dial on the side. I know there was some sort of, I think it was like some sort of patent infringement or something like that, and they had to go to this style with the, where you have to twist the lever lock right here. But all in all, these are solid guns. They shoot great. Dye's got great customer service. And as I've said before in a previous video, 99% of the problems that you're going to have with the DM is with the bolt sail O-ring. The middle O-ring, the big one that's right here on the bolt. Any problem that you have with it, if you replace that bolt sail O-ring, tends to fix everything. It fixes solenoid leaks, it fixes any sort of inconsistency issues or whatever that you have. That O-ring is 99% of the problems on the DM. If you have a problem, replace your main bolt sail O-ring. That's going to fix about everything. So appreciate you guys sitting through this. Thanks for tuning in.